Oh, last week.
Good. Parshas Emor.
Got it?
On page 672.
Oh, yeah, good.
What happened? In Parashat Emor, you have two main themes discussed in detail. The first one relates to the Kohanim, descendants of Aharon. I am actually a descendant of Aharon, but I'm not a Kohen. My mother is a daughter of a Kohen. It's like, but he still is a grandfather. Once removed. It's still considered. However, if you are indeed a member of that, they call it a tribe, but if you're a member of Kahuna, there are some honors. At the same time, there are limitations that are still in existence. The honors were very significant at a time when they had a unique role. They were the ones who educated the Jewish people. They were the ones who inspired the Jewish people. They were the spiritual leaders. As time moved on, and as we left the land of Israel, the role of a spiritual leader was taken over by others. And it makes no difference if your father was a Kohen or he wasn't a Kohen. You could become that spiritual leader. But nevertheless, these details are spelled out in the first part of this week's portion, the laws of Kohen. They are supposed to separate themselves from spiritual impurity, which obviously carries a very important message, which we're going to touch upon. And then we are told that you should know, in verse 6, the Kohanim shall be Kedoshim, Iyu Lelokehem, they shall be holy, and they shall not desecrate their standard. They have a significance. The Kohen has a significance.
672.
And if you want to know, on page 672, if you want to know what the Kohen does that places upon him this privilege and responsibility, is that they, second half of verse 6, that is because et Ishei Hashem, they offer the fire offerings to God, lechem, which is the food, the bread of their God. That is what they offer. So they have this role of esh and lechem. Esh and lechem. Okay? So they offer on the fire. So you can envision the temple service. They are standing there by the altar. There's a fire. So that obviously symbolizes something, but it really is telling us what they do. They perform a service by the fire, and they also offer the food to God. What is the food? The korbanot, called bread. Now, we are told on page 674 in verse 8, at the top of the page, that we, the rest of the people of Israel, have a responsibility of treating them with respect and sanctifying them. Right? There should be a reminder, there's something significant. We sanctify them. So people of Israel, and now a message to the non-Kohanim. Bekidashto, you shall sanctify them. Ki et lechem elokecha hu makriv, because what do they offer? They offer the food of God. Now it's interesting that when we were talking about their significance, we mentioned the fire and the bread. On the other hand, when it comes to our responsibility of honoring them, meaning the non-Kohanim, we have to sanctify them, we have to honor them, we have to remind them of their role. We are told that we have to do it because they offer the lechem. What happened to the fire? What happened to the fire?
That's their responsibility. It's the Kohanim's responsibility.
Okay, so the fire is their responsibility, but if we are being told they do something special, lechem elokecha hu makriv, well, they also go ahead and deal with Ishei Hashem, right? It seems to be something is left out for a reason. So you're saying it's their responsibility. Good. Now, let's talk a little bit about bread right now. Some people are big love bread. right?
Make it.
I'm not looking at anyone. Just bread is a meal. Bread is a meal. Bread is a meal. Right? Sometimes you could have a meal without bread in some cases. Not times have changed, but historically it was all about breaking bread. Okay, today you have rice, you have sushi, whatever, quinoa, whatever you want to eat, you do have. But there's something very fascinating. God Almighty created this unbelievable world. And when it comes to packaging, right? Packaging, it's a big industry. How to package your goods. I remember, what was that? Banana. I love I always talk about bananas. You see, you remember things. But you got to give credit to the Almighty of the brilliance. We'll go to kiwi today. Talk about a kiwi, right? A soft fruit could be transported all the way from New Zealand, but due to the fact that the Almighty gave it this peel, right, that has a little bit of a roughness, just enough to protect it. There's brilliance in all of fruits and vegetables. The fact that you peel an orange and that you could slice it, and every segment is precisely one that could fit in your mouth. I mean, this is unbelievable. And packaging is very important. And if you think about, I remember in Memphis that there was a lawyer there, and we were sitting there by a Shabbos table, and one of the kids asked him what kind of lawyer he was. He talked about patents. And he wanted to explain to the kids what he does. He was a top lawyer there in Memphis, and he noted the following, that there was a company that was selling frozen okra. I mean, it's the South, okay? So the fellow was in touch with supermarkets, and the way supermarkets work is that they were charging the producer per space shelf. In other words, if your product takes up 6 inches by 3 inches, if on the other end your product only takes up 6 inches by 1 inch, so then you're going to be paying less to the supermarket. Mm-hmm. So he said to himself, wait a second, I got to figure out a way, if I want to sell my frozen okra at the supermarket there, which was called, believe it or not, Schnucks, not a joke, only in Memphis, you can look this up. So if I want to sell my okra in Schnucks, what do I have to do? I got to figure out a way to create a package.
Vacuum pack.
A package where it stands and it's not laying. Okay, so this is what he does. So he goes ahead and he produces this package, and it's very successful. And then one day he's sitting in his office and he says, wait a second, I can make much more money by selling packages than by selling okra. So he goes to a lawyer, gets a patent, and from that, and he was the one that started the distribution of packaging. So packaging is so important because you want to go ahead and package it in a way that's convenient, that's easy to open, and it protects the food. And then you look at what the Almighty produced, and the banana, we got to work with the banana. You put a banana, have you ever cleaned up after a child, after they go through a banana, right? My kids were very good in getting banana everywhere. My Aaron had at one point some longer hair as a 1.5-year-old, and everything, peanut butter, banana, you get everything. Banana is so soft, and yet the peel is a perfect package. So if the Almighty wants to make easy food for us to eat and enjoy and appreciate Him, He could do it. Where did He seem to skip over that? Bread. Bread. What would you say? You've been too long in Florida. What do you mean? Mango also has, the pit does protect it. We could go through our mango one time as well. But the bread, you got to admit, the stages and steps you have to go through to get from that which the wheat that is growing in the field until you have a final product, right? It's toils, avodas parach. It's 11 stages. The rabbis actually broke it down because for the laws of Shabbat, they're relevant to know because that which is needed to produce the bread is prohibited on Shabbat. And it's interesting because if bread is the most fundamental, the basic ingredient for a meal, couldn't he just produce a bread tree? And in the past, Rafa was going to say, yes, that there is somewhere a bread tree.
There is in Jamaica.
There is, and okay, you send me the articles. True, but I have not seen them growing in my backyard, right? And I don't think many of us. So why is it? And when the rabbis talk about the Messianic era, they talk about a time when breads are going to grow on trees. It could be it symbolizes the fact that you could just go into Sobeys and buy breads, maybe. But what is the message there? So the message is that bread symbolizes our journey of life to find truth and meaning. Torah, it symbolizes Torah. In what way does it symbolize Torah? Do you think that right and wrong is just something you could pick off a tree and know that that is right and that is wrong? In other words, to figure out what is considered right and what is considered wrong is not so easy. It's actually complex. There's a process. You have to think through it and make a decision, right? There's a big to-do now in the frum community throughout North America and the world about measles and vaccinations. Everyone's talking about it, right? Why? Because there are cases, most probably are cases, where a child gets a vaccine and the reaction is not a good one and it could lead to some kind of problems, okay? So now, if you're going to hear that from your neighbor who heard it from their neighbor, who heard it from their dressmaker, right? And then you're going to make a decision based on that, right? So you are making a decision, a very significant decision, based on something you heard from someone you heard. Well, that's not how you make decisions. You have to go ahead and get an expert, someone that looks at all of the evidence. And the expert makes a decision, and the rational person listens to the expert who toiled in the field, and not someone who just read an article or two on the internet, right? That's a common decision to make. You let the experts make a decision. And when you are processing a difficult area, you have to first break it down. You have to sit sometimes. You have to let all the information settle. You have to separate those irrelevant cases from the data and the ones that are relevant. And then eventually you have a product that's known as the truth, right? Even when it comes to the situation in Israel, right? Palestinians are suffering. There's no one can deny that Gaza is not exactly a great place in some areas. I mean, again, if you get millions of dollars from Qatar through the Israelis, you're okay. But there are Palestinian children that are suffering. You can't deny that. And therefore, when you go ahead and you see signs on synagogues or in schools about Israelis being all happy, right? You produce a video. This was something that was making its rounds over the past few days of some pro-Palestinian who stood in front of the shul, right, and filmed a video, right? And on the surface, you'll say, well, he wasn't saying anything, right? All he was saying is that they're suffering. Well, to stand in front of a shul right after we had incidents in North America, right, and telling us basically that we are spreading a lie. In other words, you have to process it. You have to process it. And if you are English, right, and you're in the Labor Party, you don't process that. You don't process that. Why are you not going to process it? Well, you could say that it's good old anti-Semitism, but I believe that there are many young people on college campuses that are fed pictures and images and stories, and they make a decision. And they run with that truth that they are told, that Israel is an apartheid state, and that there's a siege on Gaza, and they take away land, right? And there's a lot of suffering because of the Israelis. They made a decision because they felt that this is something that you're just shown a picture, you pick your fruit, and you have the truth. Truth is different. Truth, you have to break it down. You need to get it from an expert, right? And that's, by the way, the halachic system as well, right? Jewish law is not, I feel it's right. No, there are situations where you might feel it is right, but you are actually wrong. The Chazon Ish shared the famous story of a town that had an old melamed, an old teacher. And the old teacher was not exactly interested in teaching kids, but he had to make a living. Right? It was common. My father would share how in the shtetl, there was once a sheichet, right? And the sheichet was getting older, and he wasn't able to check his knife well. So they go to the community leader, and he says, okay, he can't be a sheichet. Okay, so you shouldn't shecht anymore, so we'll teach kids. So someone said, okay, so we'll be shechting the kids instead. In other words, if you think about it, historically, you can't do anything else. Make him a melamed, let him abuse the kids, and all his frustration and anger about his lack of success. He has perfect 7-year-olds to go ahead and beat up and mission accomplished, right? So imagine, says the Chazon Ish, you have such a melamed in town, right? And he's trying to teach with no excitement, no enthusiasm, no interest. The kids are not interested. But he makes a little bit of a parnasa, he's able to feed himself. And then suddenly a new Melamed comes to town, right? A young guy, right? With, we'll add a Hasidic flavor, of real enthusiastic about education, and comes into the classroom, and he loves what he is teaching, and he is in love with his tradition. And you know what? When you feel it, this is something that is transmitted to the students. And now he becomes popular. And little by little, people are leaving the Alta Melamed to the young, exciting fellow. And they're learning more. And the town realizes this is terrible because the old Melamed is going to lose his Parnasa. So they go ahead and they start putting up letters and cursing out the new Melamed for coming to town. How do you have a chutzpah to take someone else's Parnasa? And they make him into a terrible person for coming to town. So how do you determine right and wrong? Notes the Chazon Ish. You have to go ahead and research the halachic system. The halachic system tells us that when it comes to the future of Torah and the future of the people of Israel and getting qualified educators, right? There's no such thing as a monopoly. If the young fellow has the talent, it's a free market. Allow him to do it because kinasofrim tar b'chachma. That's how you increase wisdom. So don't go ahead and paskin with your emotion. Don't determine right from wrong with your emotion. That's what's done in college campuses throughout North America. Emotion is not what you determine things with. It's a process compared to bread. And therefore, when we eat bread, and bread is so special for us because we recognize that there's a process, and it is a reminder of the teachings of Torah, and there are many verses, lechu lachmu belachmi, in other words, bread is compared to that Torah. And what we are being told here, Kohanim, the educators, you, the Israelites, respect them. Respect the educators because they put time and effort into the bread, into the process. They teach you the law and they think through it, right? And by the way, the halachic, the yeshivot that produce the halachic authority demand toil because they want to know the truth. So in verse 8 on page 674, V'kidashto, you sanctify him, ki et lechem elokecha hu makriv, he's involved in the bread. On the other hand, the fire, we don't believe that we pick spiritual leaders to be spiritual for us. That's not how it works. The good spiritual leader inspires others, right? They kindle that fire within us, right? A relationship to Hashem, an appreciation for the world, an appreciation for our tradition, an appreciation for our people, an appreciation for the gifts of our time, right? That emotion that we have to live with, you cannot be yotze, you cannot fulfill your obligation by someone else being emotional, being excited. You have to do it. So what is the goal of the spiritual leader of the Kohen? To ignite, to kindle the fire within every person, right? That's what fire does, right? Esh lecha, ner lecha, ner lemah, they inspire many. And therefore, when we are told that Kiddushim, they are holy, they are involved in the fire of God, and they are involved in the bread. But when it comes to respecting them, don't respect them because they are spiritual. You be spiritual as well. They are there to produce the fire, okay? They are there. Aharon HaKohen is there to produce the fire, to ignite all of us, okay? So this is piece of information number one you need to know about this week's parasha and the role of the Kohen. And as a result of that, you can appreciate the second half of the parsha, which you're going to find on page 682. At 682, we have the Chagim. You're familiar with the Chagim, but you have to know, number one, whenever you talk about the Chagim, you have to start with Pesach. Pesach is number one. Right? It's not Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is not the beginning. The first month is Nisan. That's Pesach. So we go through Pesach. And Pesach, we start our journey as a very primitive nation. I deep down believe that our ancestors were very primitive. We Jews were very primitive. How is it that we became a quite successful entity? Right? It is the fact that we committed ourselves to knowledge. Right? The people of the book. There is a lot we have to offer, but it did not start off. It started off Pesach. We it's merit of our forefathers, Zchut Avot, Imahot, we get out of Egypt, but then we start our growth and we reach Shavuot, we merit revelation. But then what happens is, right, they compare, by the way, Pesach to the engagement, right, and Shavuot to the marriage. They stand under the chuppah, like Har Sinai.
This parsha starts with Shabbat.
Okay, so Shabbos itself does start. The rabbis tell us that it is to tell you that Shabbat, you understand, is important. Remember, the Moadim are also important. The Vilna Gaon actually notes that when it says 6 days you do work, refer to the 6 holidays where you could do work, you could prepare food. And the 7th one is Yom Kippur. But yeah, it starts with Shabbat. But the main theme, this is what we read on all the Chagim basically, is the journey that we have. Pesach, Shavuot is the marriage, and then we have the first fight, right? The first fight within the marriage, which is the sin of the golden calf, which leads to a Tisha B'Av, right? Where everything goes wrong. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. Then, what solidifies a marriage? How to deal with the fight. In other words, if you figure out a way of addressing it and sensing that, you know what, I felt rotten when you were upset at me, I felt rotten when I was upset at you, so therefore we're going to strengthen our bond. That is Sukkot. Sukkot, in other words, you have Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? Yom Kippur is the big bouquet of flowers, and then you come to Sukkot, you feel this closeness to Hashem, you feel, the embrace of the Almighty. That is the journey of our nation. Okay, so how do we go? We go like that, and then like that. Okay, hopefully like the stock market, that it will make a big return. So this is what we are told. So now the question is, if this is a parsha that starts off with the role of the Kohen to inspire the fire, why or how do the Chagim fit into the picture? Okay, that's a basic question. Now you have to remember another thing. If Aharon HaKohen is about the Chagim, and he is, because where the Kohanim work, that is where there's a court. And the courts in Jerusalem are the ones that determine when the month starts. And when you have a beginning to a month, you could afterwards count to the 15th of the month. So there is a role, there's a very strong connection between the Kohanim and the Chagim. On the other hand, when you look at Aharon's brother, Moshe, he seems to be more of a Shabbat type of guy. What do I mean by that? Remember on Shabbat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. Moshe was happy with the gift of his portion. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu was a Shabbat man, and if you remember Parshat Vayakel, right? He gathers everyone, Moshe, and he tells them about the Shabbat. And then he notes, and this is one detail we're going to focus on too, when he wants to share with them the laws of Shabbat, he mentions one of the many prohibited works, in Parashat Vayakel. He tells them, listen, on Shabbat, lo tivaru esh b'chol moshvotechem, no fire. So Shabbat is all about no fire. The holidays, and this week's Parsha, is all about fire. You use fire on a holiday. You're supposed to cook fresh food. You don't create it, but you work with it, right? You transfer it from place to place, right? Rabbinically, we don't ignite it. But at the same time, it is about fire. So Aharon HaKohen is the fire where Moshe Rabbeinu tells us Shabbat is his day, lo tivaru esh. So we're going to go ahead and give two explanations as to what exactly each one symbolizes. So there are two approaches we've talked upon over the years, and it works as follows. We talked often about, you often hear messages about Olam Haba, the world to come. Part of our faith, right? There's an entity called the Neshama. The Neshama lives on. Fine. So Shabbat is compared to Me'ein Olam Haba, to the world to come. So Shabbat is like the spiritual realm. And therefore we are more spiritual on Shabbat. We leave the physical world, we don't prepare food. The Chagim, on the other hand, we are in the physical world, right? We prepare food. It's mentioned that on a Chag, you're supposed to end your tefillah early. I haven't been in a shul where they follow that, because you're supposed to go home and prepare fresh food. Why? Because that's what a Chag is about. You make things, you're in this world, okay? And, it's always, I mentioned here in the past the teachings of Rabbi Yechezkel Sarna, Rav Sarna. Rav Sarna, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Hebron. And he was a person who lived with feeling. He was in tune to the world. He was also in tune to the times. They say that after Yerushalayim was freed in 1967, he simply was overwhelmed. Like he did not understand why everyone else is not walking around like with excitement that's supernatural. Like he simply couldn't relate to the world anymore, or to the world around him, because he felt something incredible has happened. Like, why are we not jumping up and down? Like, he simply was a person who served with regesh, with feeling. And he had this magnificent approach to nature and to the world. And I love mentioning his insights, because sometimes you hear messages that religion is about the afterlife. And this world is only here to get you there, right? So it minimizes the significance of the world, right? So why go see, if there's something magnificent, if there are beautiful cherry blooms, why go see it if this world is only here for the sake of the world to come? Rav Sarna would tell you that's not the case. And he says, listen, tune in to your Birkat HaMazon next time. When you thank the Almighty for the world that was created with chen. Chen. You could translate that as a charm. Any better translation to chen? There's something charming about the world. So therefore he writes that, look at the magnificent fruits. He talks about our oranges and how every section, mechulakim lechalakim medudim kamo bemidah, like the perfection in nature. God gave us this world with a charm. It's a charming world. And therefore, since we have to be grateful to the Almighty for it, so therefore, al korchach, there's no question, alav lehakir et ze behakara mele'ah. You have an obligation to recognize it to the full extent. In other words, that you have to go ahead and walk out to the world with an amazement. It disturbs him that those who really appreciate, the world are the ones who try to claim it's all random. And then he says the best of them, meaning of those that deny God, are the ones that are at least are sensitive to animals. They focus on Tsar Balei Chaim. But to go ahead and appreciate the world without God, that's not what we're supposed to do. What we are supposed to do is realize this is a magnificent world. And in his words, don't view it only as a place to get to the world to come. Ha'olam hazeh lo nivra. This world was not created liot olam shafel ve'afel. In other words, this is not this boring, that's not what it is. It's a magnificent world, right? And appreciate it. Appreciate the world you live in. And that is what the Chagim are about. They are in tune to seasons, right? Come Shavuot, people would be gathering, would be harvesting in their field. They would recognize what a magnificent world we live in. Come Sukkot, there's ingathering. You fill your storage houses with grain, with produce. You have an appreciation for nature. And you realize that there's God in nature. That is what a Chag is all about. Okay, that's rule number one. Shabbat does talk about the world to come and our spiritual identity. But Chagim are about appreciate this world. Okay, that's message number one. But message number two, which is our main focus, has to do with the fact that we as humans have up and downs. We have up and downs. In other words, if you are always in the same mood and never have a real good day and never have a real bad day, you're either a malach or a robot. Sometimes when you log online in some websites and they ask you to click "I am not a robot," and you think for a second, am I not a robot? That's right. You're not a robot, because if you have good days and bad days, guess what? You are a human being, no question about it. And when we talk about fire, People meditate by fire, not just in our faith. Think of the Havdalah candle. Ever been to one of those NCSY gatherings? They turn off the lights and there's a flickering. The fire symbolizes something spiritual, right? You're trying to make your way up, but you need to be attached to something physical. But it flickers, right? It has good days, bad days. That's what it symbolizes. So the message that we are being told here, Esh is Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen is the one that tells you if you have a bad day, okay, you're a human being, right? You have a good day, great, you are a fire. Moshe Rabbeinu is supernatural. The man that could spend 40 days on the top of the mountain and not eat, the man who separates from family life, he symbolizes, in some ways, like an angel, right? He doesn't have really an appreciation for the ups and downs of the human condition and their struggle, because he is really in that ideal form, the no fire form. That's Moshe. That's Shabbat. Lo tevaru esh. There's no fire for Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no fire. He doesn't have that struggle that we have. According to some, he didn't even have his complete free will, because if God said anything uttered by him is Torah, he can't have free will, because what if he changes his mind one day? So this is a man that is detached, right? He teaches the law, he teaches the dry law as is. It's interesting to note that when we give gifts to Levim, like Moshe was a Levi, we're supposed to give precise gifts. Precise gifts. In other words, you have 100 pounds, you're supposed to measure and give them ma'aser. You're supposed to give them me'eser, 10%, a precise amount. And you are supposed to perform a measurement. A man of precision appreciates a gift of precision. On the other hand, when it comes to the gift of the Kohen, and you ask the Torah, how much do you give the Kohen for Truma? So it says it depends. According to Torah law, you can give anything. Rabbinically, you give, and if you want, you give them 1 out of 60. If you're more generous, you give 1 out of 50. If you are extremely generous, you give 1 out of 40. And you say to yourself, what kind of system is that? Why don't you give me a precise amount? Well, the Kohen is that emotional being. He's human. He has his ups and his downs, but he also has an appreciation. You know, the man of the letter of the law is satisfied with getting his paycheck and getting done what needs to be done and nothing more. The Kohen, the emotional giver, he gives emotionally, he gives without boundaries, but he needs that appreciation. You know, sometimes with teachers, right, what do they appreciate when at the end of the year they get a $10 Starbucks card? When you think about it, you know, here they are paying, you know, the union, and here they are paying taxes, and here they are getting, but for some reason, people that serve with emotion do appreciate, it's not the $10, it's the idea that people recognize that you're putting time and effort and energy. People of emotion don't want gifts that are precise, right? They don't want people to be obligated to give them a precise amount. They want it to fluctuate because then they appreciate what they get. That is the Kohen. And it's very important to identify, by the way, that there are personalities that are Moshe/Levi/Ma'aser personalities. People that you ask them the halachic question and they'll just give you a straight answer, right? Circumstances are irrelevant for them. They give you the letter of the law. And then you have the Kohen type that understands that sometimes you have to be a little bit more lenient. It has to fluctuate. Because when you are having a difficult time, you cannot deal with the stringency, right? You have to have a Kohen. You have to have the personality that works with someone that understands the fire, the challenge of the fire of existence. The Ma'aser guy won't work. It has to be a Truma fellow. There's an interesting story that there's a great coach in the NFL. His name is Bill Belichick. Have you ever heard of him? What team is he with? He's with New England Patriots. So in the past, I would say a Jewish owner, a good honorable fellow, but now I'm not going to say it anymore. But now, so Bill Belichick is cut and dry, right? You do what you're supposed to do. You come in, he demands, you do your job. There's no emotional attachment there. Bill Belichick, so there's an interesting story that there was a player, I don't know his name, there was a player a few years ago on the Patriots, on the team, And he was having some difficulty emotionally, he didn't feel motivated, so he decided that he needs someone to give him some chizik, some encouragement. So he goes, he walks into Coach Belichick, and he says, you should know, I'm having a little bit of difficulty recently, I haven't felt motivated. So Belichick listens to him, and after he walks out of the office, a few hours later, he gets a call, he's been fired. Meaning the player has been cut from the team. Why? Because for Coach Belichick, it's all about the way it's supposed to be, right? On the other hand, if it would be the coach that works with emotion, he would give him some words of encouragement. He would go ahead and try to point out that we have our down days, and that's okay. That's what we try to deal with them. We try to address them. We try to get back up. So that's the journey, the people of Israel, when they reached Har Sinai, they are told that they left a place called Refidim. They reach Refidim, they arrive at Har Sinai. The rabbis know that the word rapid, like something like lerapot, like some kind of weakening. They went through a weakening. They went through a state of difficulty. You only reach highs if you go ahead and accept the fact that you're going to go through a level of difficulty. The ups and downs, the Jewish people, my grandfather would ask us as kids when we would visit him in Yerushalayim, Tagid li, ma yesh yoter b'Yerushalayim? Aliyot or yeridot? In other words, what do you have more, uphills or downhills in Yerushalayim? Now, it was a big part of his life, because whenever we would take a walk with my grandfather as a 9-year-old, it was always, oy, kan yesh aliyah, my grandmother too, then, oy, kan yesh aliyah, oh, shav yesh yerida, oy, shav yesh aliyah. And as a kid, I never understood, what's the big deal, aliyah, yerida, you walk. You understand it a little bit better, that the aliyah was a challenge. But there was a whole to do, the aliyot in yeridot. Now, Yerushalayim symbolizes that idea. Yerushalayim is where the Kohanim are. And that is their message. You have your ups, you have your downs, you have the ish. You have a life of fire. It flickers. Guess what? That's a successful life. And to prove it to you, look at the Chagim. Look at the Jewish calendar. Look at the Pesach, the Shavuot. When we count Omer every single day. Yes, we are celebrating growth. That's what it's all about. We are celebrating the gift brought on the first day of the Omer was a gift of barley. Food that was usually given to animals. The meal offering of Shavuot is wheat. Food usually consumed by humans. It symbolizes this idea of growth. We're turning it to something. But guess what? What happens after Shavuot? 40 days later, sin of the golden calf. Tisha B'Av symbolizes the day when we kvetch about the land of Israel. We have this terrible downturn, but you could bounce back and have a Sukkot. Shabbat, your weekly cycle, does not change one iota, right? It is an established system. 6 days, rest on the 7th, 6 days. It is like an angel. I'm not going to say like a robot, but it's like an angel, basically, right? 6, number 7, you rest. That is Moshe Rabbeinu. That is some kind of ideal that we relate to, but it's not the world we live in. It's a concept that we could go ahead and tap into. It's a concept that can inspire us. We live in the world of the Chagim. That's what we have to remember. I took the 2 older boys once to an amusement park. I don't know if it was a Six Flag or Hershey. And you go in, and you have to watch over them, so you have to pay as well, even though I wasn't planning to go on any of the rides at that point. Until one of the kids were so excited about this specific roller coaster that I decided to join them. And I had such charata. The second they strap you in, what on earth am I doing? And believe me, usually your worry before is not as bad as the actual experience. In this case, the experience was much worse than the worry. It was awful. It was awful. I felt sick. And I look at the kids, and they're laughing and smiling, and like, what happened? Was I once like that? Is it old age? Is it my personality? But you think about obviously no one would want a roller coaster ride. No young person would want a roller coaster ride that simply you sit on it, and it goes flat, and then you get up. It could be an amusement park for the golden years, maybe, or they're going to have Ensure Slurpees, maybe. Maybe that could be it. But be marketing that. But when it comes to young people, this is what's exciting: the ride, the ups and the downs, and that's what we have to celebrate in life. This is a very important message, and anyone that has already lived for some time knows it. The problem is obviously when the whole system of education is all a Shabbat system, right? The world to come, right? You got to be perfection. You share a story of great Torah scholars that only share their ups, right? They only had ups and more ups and more ups and more ups. And then I read about it when I'm 13, and I know about my downs, but I'm the only person in Jewish history who have ever had a down, because in the books, they don't appear. So obviously I am really, really flawed, because all the great rabbis and everyone around me and all my teachers, right, they never have any bad negative thoughts. I mean, they're all holy. They told me that they're all holy. So the result is such that this is a major problem when you only focus on Shabbat. On the other hand, the Yom Tov attitude of number one, valuing existence, valuing this world. By the way, valuing the people of Israel. When it comes to Shabbat, what do we declare? Mekadesh Shabbat. Shabbat is sanctified by God. Here we walk into a Yom Tov with an appreciation of who we are. Mekadesh, God Almighty sanctified the Israelites. Once He sanctified them, and we have established as humans courts, we declare that a month begins. And then there is a Chag. Only as a result of the sanctification of the people of Israel do we have a Chag. Wow, that is something that gives me a boost. Because when I say that the people of Israel are sanctified, I'm not just talking about some holy people who are perfect, who I read about in the Art Scroll Gadol book, but rather, we are all significant. So what does the Chagim do for me? The Chagim explains to me, I have value. The world has value, right? And the ups and the downs are really part of existence. They are part of existence. You should know that when, all of us, we used to read those types of books. I always gave credit to a book written about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, which you know well. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, when the Art Scroll put out a book about him, he was the first one where there was a little bit more honesty that he actually was, not an angel, that he was a human being. And they share an interesting story that when he was 17, he interviewed for some yeshiva in Europe, but to get there he had to connect at a train station, and he missed the connection, and he was overnight on the train, and he couldn't sleep. And when he came into the interview and he sat down in front of that Rosh Yeshiva, the first thing he did was fell asleep. And they walked out and they felt he can't come to the yeshiva. If during the interview, to get into this prestigious yeshiva, he fell asleep, how can he become ever a Torah? And that eventually got in. But I was so impressed that, wow, they shared something about him that normal people go through, that they get tired and sometimes they're sleepy and sometimes they don't pull through when they are supposed to. That is indeed, right, the Gadol book that we have to remember about. We have the ups and the downs and the journey, yes.
Apparently the family insisted that the Art Scroll biography be honest. Otherwise they wouldn't speak to him.
Interesting. That's a very Kamenetsky, that's part of their DNA, that they're very honest, and that's what really makes them great. When it comes to the Chagim, we look at the moon. The moon determines it, right? The new moon, the 15th of the moon. And you look at the moon, one night, it's going to look different the other night. Sometimes it's indeed waxing, sometimes it's waning, because that's the condition of who we are. And if the moon symbolizes the people of Israel, that we are supposed to reflect the great lights, in that case the sun, in our case God, we have to realize sometimes we're going to be doing a better job, sometimes we're going to do less of a job. But when we allow ourselves to recognize who we are, then we could continue doing it. When you only give, training, I once read up about training dogs, right? Which is quite incredible about how they train dogs. How do you train them? Treats. In other words, they want them to go ahead and sniff out weed at the airport, for example, right? So what do? They give the dog a little bit of it, he sniffs it, they give him a treat. Then they put a few, he sniffs throughout the room, he stops there, you give them what? Positive reinforcement. You did something good, you give yourself a treat, okay? That has to be the way we work with ourselves, and that's what education has to be, right? You do something good, you get encouragement. But sometimes the focus is, there's an expectation you should be an angel. When you do something bad, then you get called into the principal office, then you get all the attention. And what happens is, at times, it's far more exciting when you do something wrong, right? That's the problem. We really don't recognize the human condition. Just to end off with a story that has to do with the kids. When my kids were maybe 2 or 3, we got our first computer. Someone gave us an old Apple, an old 476, I think it was, an old Apple computer, and it had a lot of games on it. The kids were very excited. At a young age, they figured out how to play Pac-Man. But one of the things it had a trash can. And when you would throw something into the trash, Oscar would come out. For those of you who don't know, Oscar was one of my mechanchim in Sesame Street, one of my first educators. And Oscar lived in a trash can, and Oscar popped out of the trash can. And as you would drag items, right, to the trash can and put it in, Oscar would pop out and sing, "I love it because it's trash. I love trash," which is, an old Megan on the Alta. So now it was very exciting. Now the problem was the kids picked up on it, and then Aaron, as a 2-year-old, would go to the computer, and I would write something like a Dvar Torah or a register. And he, knowing that it's far, what would he do? He would drag my Dvar Torah, throw it into the trash, because he wants to see Oscar come out and sing. What do? We make throwing things into the trash exciting. Obviously, they're going to go ahead and do it, right? So this denial of who we are, this denial of our expectation, perfect. Attention is only when you do things no good. That's not what Judaism is an understanding. Encourage when it's good. Recognize that things are not perfect. We are a fire. We have our ups and downs. We go through the Chagim. We have our ups and downs. We are compared to the moon. We have our ups and downs. And we are inspired by Aharon HaKohen. And he himself had those ups and downs, if you think about it, when it comes to the sin of the golden calf. He had his personal tragedies, but he has inspired us because he recognizes who we are, and that's how we achieve things. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.